Alright, Unit 5, Lesson 5, last lesson. We are now going to divide complex numbers in this lesson. Alright, so when dividing two complex numbers, write the problem, first of all, obviously, in A plus BI form. And you need to rationalize the denominator. And you're going to do this by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by what I introduced a little bit at the very end of last lesson, the conjugate. Okay. Remember, a complex number and its conjugate will give you a real number. And we'll remove the I from the denominator, so the imaginary part. So basically, if I take a look at this problem, you got 4 plus 2i, and you're dividing that by 3 minus I. So we said we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the denominator. So the opposite of 3 minus I is 3 plus I. So I multiply the bottom by it and the top by it. So if I do that, the bottom's pretty easy, remember, because the outside and inside are going to fall out. So we're going to get just 3 times 3, which is 9. And a minus I times an I is going to be a minus I squared. If you want to write that for a moment, that's fine, but you're getting pretty good at that, so you should know that actually turns out to be 1, and we'll clean that up in a minute. Now the top over here on the other side, different story. 4 times 3 is 12. Remember, if you need tabular, please do that. 4 times the I on the outside is going to be 4i. Then you got to take 2i times 3, that's 6i. And 2i times I is a 2i squared. Once again, clean a few things up. I've got a 12 in the top. 4i and 6i together make 10i. And then don't forget the 2 times I squared is negative 1 again, so that's a minus 2. So we're not done cleaning up that top yet. If you want to finish the top first, it's fine. The 12 out in front with the minus 2 will give you 10. So I get 10 plus 10i. The bottom, on the other hand, you get 9, and it's minus what would be a negative 1. So it's 9 plus 1, which is 10. And this can be reduced. You can use my V trick again, so you know the 10s go into all of those. So your final answer is 1 plus I all over 1, which I don't need to write. So there's my answer. And that's a little more of a complex example. We'll start off with an easy one here for practice. Obviously, what's the opposite? We get rid of the 2i in the bottom. All we have to do is basically multiply by the I part again. You don't have to do 2i. If you want to do 2i, that's fine. But you just like the radical, you only have to multiply the radical part. And if I do the bottom, I got to do the top. So if I do that, I get 5 times I is 5i on the top. On the bottom, I get 2i squared. And of course, I squared is negative 1. Keep that in mind. So that's a negative 1. So I get 5i over a negative 2. And you are welcome to leave your answer that way. All right, so let's look at some more examples. All right, so here we go on dividing. So once we said in the bottom we got 2 plus I, we need to multiply by the conjugate. So we take 2 minus I on the bottom. And we'll multiply by 2 minus the conjugate in the top. So when we do that, we'll actually get 3 times 2, which is 6. And 3 times the negative I is minus 3i. That's the bottom, top, new numerator. The bottom, of course, we know 2 times 2 is 4. We know the outside, inside are going to cancel. That's why we do the conjugate. And an I times a minus I is a minus I squared. Well, we know an I squared is really negative 1, square root of negative 1 times negative square root of 1, so it's a negative 1. So I've got the 6 minus 3i staying alone in top. And this really is a 4, and it's going to be minus what turns out to be a negative 1. So you're minus a negative 1 here. So it's really 4 plus 1, which means the bottom is 5. And that has been rationalized, and I can leave it that way. Okay. Number 3 is already set up for you that way. They already showed you by multiplying by the conjugate. This whole thing is the conjugate right here. So same thing. 4i times 5 turns out to be 20i. And 4i times I is going to be, what's a 4i squared? Talk about that in a moment. The bottom, of course, 5 times 5 is going to give me 25. And a minus I times a times an I against, once again, is going to be a minus I squared. Now, once again, we want to replace both of these I squareds with what they're equal to, which is a negative 1. And that's a negative 1. So I go and I clean this up. Bottom, let's take care of the bottom first. You got 25. And minus a negative 1 is plus 1. So that's 26 in the bottom. Okay. We're going to keep change. The top, on the other hand here, the 20i, I'm not going to be able to touch. And we want the a plus bi form. So I'm going to put the 20i second, reverse the order. And we know 4 times a negative 1 is a negative 4. Now the only other thing I can do here is if you take a look at it, all 3 terms are even. Therefore I can reduce this thing and divide by 2. So you want to use my old V method here. We can take a 2 out of everything. So you get a negative 2 plus 10i all over 13. And that can't be reduced anymore. Alright, let's move on. Final problem. I am going to multiply once again by the conjugate. In this case, 4 plus 2i. And the top one, also by the 4 plus 2i. That way we're really only multiplying by 1. The new denominator will be the 4 times 4, which is 16. And it's going to be a minus 4i squared. The top is not going to fall out so nicely. So let's see what we got here. 3 times 4 is a 12. 3 times 2i is a 6i. Then you got to take the I times 4, that's a 4i. And you got to take the I times a 2i, which is a 2i squared. A little different than what we've been seeing so far. Okay. Clean this thing up a bit, and what do you got? Remember, this thing here really is a negative 1. I squared is a negative 1, so that's really a negative 2. So I basically have a 12 and a minus 2 in the top if I take the first and last piece. And then, so of course I can replace that with 10. And 6i and 4i make 10i. So that's the right form on the top. On the bottom I got 16 minus, that's going to be 4 times a negative 1, so it's a negative 4. So it's 16 minus a negative 4, which is 16 plus 4, so that's 20. And of course, as you can see, bingo, 10's going to all these, so it's going to be 1 plus I all over 2. And that will be our answer in A plus BI form. Love it, live it, list it, and guess what? We'll see you in class tomorrow.